All right, welcome everyone. So thankful to have you guys here again for the Writer's Block. And I'm really thankful to welcome my friend back into the block. She's taught for us a few times, Lara D'entremont, and she is here to talk to us about book proposals. And I just want to say off the bat, Lara helped me with my book proposal. And so I know that she knows what she's talking about with book proposals, and there's some ladies here who want to learn from her, and many of you who will listen to this, I'm sure, will glean a lot of valuable information from Lara. So thanks, Lara. Thanks for being here today.
No worries. I'm really glad to be here. It's always fun.
Well, we're so glad to have you. So yeah, so we're going to talk about book proposals. For those who, well, first of all, why don't you introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about what you like to write about, where you live, kind of what lane are you in your writing life?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of nowhere, Canada. Very rural. And
Mommy.
wait, mommy's talking. You go. Um, yeah, middle of nowhere, Canada. Mom to three boys, 7-year-old and two 4-year-olds. So
Busy
pretty
lady.
hectic life.
Yes.
And when they are sleeping at school or having their quiet time, I get my writing done. And I particularly like to write for new and young moms, but women in general, Christian women, about understanding their faith, mental health, and all the fun things of being a mom. Not teaching them how to be a mom because I'm still figuring that out, but thinking through the different hardships of being a mom and the joys of being a mom. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that comes through in your writing. You're a beautiful writer. And you have accomplished quite a bit with your writing already, but tell us a little bit about your experience with book proposals and tell us what a book proposal is.
Yeah, so a book proposal is essentially a business document, for lack of a better word, where you propose to a publisher, this is a book I want to write and I think would be a good fit for you to publish. And I have experience with that, as in I've had two books published at this time, a third in the works. And so the first one was essentially a collection of essays about motherhood and mental health in the early days. And the second one was completely different, a fantasy novel for teens. And the next one is actually a picture book. So all over the board,
Wow.
lots of
All
different
over the place. Yeah.
lots of different proposals have been written. And I also have a graveyard of failed proposals on my computer. So several at this point.
Well, and maybe they're not totally dead. Like I think sometimes you can resurrect old ideas, retool them a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
so did you write a book proposal for all three of those books?
Yes. Yep, I did. And the so fiction's a bit different. Some people don't even want a book proposal for fiction. They only focus on what they call the query letter, which is a one-page letter that quickly gives the publisher an idea of the book, and the synopsis, which is a longer summary, beginning, end, spoilers, and all. But then some publishers and agents still want to see a book proposal for that. So I did both of those for my fiction piece. And then for my first book on motherhood, I did a book proposal. And for the children's book, I did as well. But that was a lot shorter, just given the nature of it being a picture book.
Okay. So does everyone, like, if you have the desire to write a book, why can you not just sit down and write your book? I mean, you can, but why would it be better to start with a book proposal?
Yeah, so the thing with most publishers and agents, especially when it comes well, particularly when it comes to nonfiction, they want only at the most the first 3 chapters because they want their hand in being able to help mold and change and alter this book and see it grow. And it's also when it comes to fiction, nonfiction, it's not as important to have that whole manuscript because yes, there is a theme that flows through. You're not following an actual narrative arc that you want to be able to see beginning, middle, and end. Whereas for fiction, in a picture book, they want to see the completed manuscript because they want to know you have the ability to carry this story to completion. Whereas with a nonfiction book, each chapter is pretty much standalone. Yes, the ideas should build on each other, but they can also stand alone in the sense that I don't need to worry about, can you carry this idea through to completion?
Yeah, and those first 3 chapters are so helpful, right? As for you, the writer, to be able to say to yourself, yeah, I know I can keep writing on this topic, right? It shows
Yeah.
that you have some command over your topic and about your subject matter. And it's such a good practice to start doing that actual writing. Um, and then kind of discipline yourself to stop once that's done to complete your book proposal. So how do you know, like, if you're ready to write a book proposal? If you have a book idea, um, like how fleshed out does that idea need to be to start working on a book proposal?
I'd say, honestly, building that book proposal can show you if you actually do have an idea of substance that can be carried through to the book level. Because a book proposal forces you to think through these ideas in a linear way and to see, like, is there actually enough material here? Because in a book proposal, you're going through and outlining every single chapter, not like in depth, like paragraphs, but like you have to write a nice solid paragraph about the chapter. You have to come up with, okay, you go wait in the living room. You have to be able to explain who the audience is. You have to be able to explain who this book would fit for. And so I think just going through that process, you very easily see whether or not this idea is fully fleshed out and whether or not it's book length, because you're forced to do that. You're forced to make it fit into a whole book. And there have been times I've had an idea and I've tried to stretch it out into book proposal form and realized, you know what? I think this is just a few articles. I don't have
Hmm.
enough substance here to write several chapters at 3,000 words apiece.
Yeah, yeah, I think that is such a wise thing because it gives you a little bit of a practice round with your own material. So that's really helpful. So one of the things I think many writers worry about when it comes to writing a book proposal is that whole element of having a platform. I think this is a relatively new thing for writers. My mom is a twice traditionally published writer, and it used to be back when she was writing books that if you had the skill to write a book and they liked your writing and they liked your idea, you could get a book deal. But now we have this whole element of having a book or a writer platform. So can you talk a little bit to that about, maybe addressing some of the concerns that a lot of writers have about that element in particular and how that might be like overcome if you feel like your platform is too small or it's in the beginning stages of getting worked out, how you can kind of establish yourself even with a small platform to a potential publisher.
Yeah, I think platform, at least I know for me and other writers I've talked to, can really feel like that overwhelming and scary piece and almost make you feel like giving up because you're like, I don't have enough to show here. And there is a degree to which, yeah, publishers do want to see some platform. The smaller the publisher, the less important it is, whereas the bigger the publisher, they tend to care more about it. And agents too, because they need to know that when this book sells, they're going to have a reasonable cut for themselves because this is their income too, right? They're not just being greedy. This is their livelihood. So particularly larger publishers and agents, they want to see a substantial platform. Like I've heard numbers thrown around in the tens of thousands that they want to see. And that was a few years ago. It's probably gone up since then.
Yeah, probably so.
But smaller publishers are more flexible and willing to work with these smaller platformed authors. And so definitely don't be discouraged if you do have that smaller platform, because the ones who aren't as concerned about platform, what they want to see is simply that you're trying, that you know you are in the you know how to grow a list, an email list, for example, and you're working on it. you are trying to have a social media presence, that you are being consistent in these habits and trying to build something and getting your name out there, writing for other publications. If they see that effort and they see that you're working on it, a lot of publishers are willing to say, hey, I'm willing to work with you on this. We'll help you grow this platform. We'll provide you some coaching, or we will, we have a marketing team that will help market this book. We don't need to stress as much about your platform, especially if, because they talk about the three legs that you have a good writing, you have a good idea, and you have a good platform. And if that platform's lagging, but the other two are really strong, they're willing to work with that. And so don't think of it as all hope is lost because you have small numbers.
Yeah, I hope that's encouraging to women writers who are listening, that you don't have to have tens of thousands, but to show a good faith effort that you've got some of those foundational building blocks in place, and they're hopefully working towards building and growing and maybe showing a trajectory of growth, even if it's small by comparison. So yeah, so platform is often just a really big, um, just a hindrance for a lot of writers to feel ready to write a book proposal. But um, tell us more about, like, what, besides, some of the basic, you know, big idea of your book and including numbers on platform, what are some of the other things a good proposal should have? What elements does it need?
Yeah, a good proposal is going to focus on, I love you, is going to focus on a few main areas. And one of the first things they want to see is, can you distill this book down into a single line? What is your tagline? What is the main focus? Because it may seem strange, like, hey, I'm writing a whole book. You want me to distill it down to one sentence. But if your idea is so broad and so big that you cannot bring it down to a single sentence, you have too much going on. This is too much for a single book, and it's not going to be coherent, and it's not going to be thematic and hold together. You need that string that's holding the whole thing together. And so they want to know you have that. Then you need to be able to summarize the book in a longer form, like back cover copy, or if it's a work of fiction, then you want to get that synopsis. They want to see that you can talk about it in a cohesive way, expand on this idea without having to use pages and pages, but be able to demonstrate the movement this book is going to take, the journey it's going to take you on, and how all of these ideas, all these different chapters flow into one place. Then, of course, they're going to want to know what platform, how are you able to market this idea? How are you already reaching the audience that you're saying this book is written for? And they want to know who that audience is. Who is this book intended for? Because as they say in marketing, if you're trying to reach everyone, you're actually reaching no one. And
Mm.
so it's okay to be specific and say, I am writing for new moms. I am writing for people who are empty nesting. Like, it's okay to be specific. They want to see that, because if you say this book is for everyone and anyone, they're going to immediately disregard it, because your idea is not clear enough, it's not specific enough to actually be not only marketable but even readable and applicable to anybody. Because again, if you're going too broad, it's not going to touch anybody. Nobody's going to be able to relate because you're constantly reaching and trying to keep it too general so that
Hmm.
no one can be truly touched by the words. So they want to know, they want to hear what the book is about, they want to hear about who it's for, and they want to see if you're able to actually sell this book. And you're also going to have to include, like I said, go through every single chapter and summarize it and explain how it all fits together. Along with, and then as we talked about before, depending on who you're submitting it to, anywhere from 2 to 3 sample chapters.
Yeah. It's a big undertaking. All that you have described sounds like a lot of work. It is a lot of work. What do you think is a reasonable amount of time? And granted, I think you kind of have a bit of self-discovery as you're going. You're learning. You're also writing chapters, so that is all dependent on the individual writer. But what would you guesstimate would be a good time frame for a writer to think like I need to dedicate X amount of hours to completing a really solid book proposal? What's involved in that?
Like you said, I think it depends on you as the author. And I think it also depends how fleshed out is this idea? Like, did you just come up with it yesterday and now you're sitting down to write this proposal? Or have you been musing on this idea for months or even years? And like you have tons of ideas and you're finally ready to sit down and try to make something of them. It might go fairly quickly, but if, like I said, if you've just got this idea this week, it might take you longer to really expand and flesh out those ideas. I've seen people throw together book proposals in a matter of a few weeks. And I've also heard of other authors taking multiple months. And so I think it really depends on how well do you know this topic? How long have you been thinking on it? Yeah, I think it also depends on how much time you're willing to sit down and put into it. If this is your side hobby and you're only getting a few minutes here and there, which is fine. A lot of young moms who are trying to write, that's their reality. Then it might take you longer. Whereas somebody, your kids are in school all day or your kids have fled the nest, then maybe it's maybe it's going to take you less days because you're able to sit down for huge chunks of time and really just bang this thing out.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I remember hearing one time to plan on 70 to 100 hours. So I don't know if that uh, yeah, that was often really overwhelming to me as I was getting ready to sit down and write my own book proposal. But I think that was probably an accurate guesstimate for me when I was doing it. But it was also my first one. So I think maybe, hopefully, in the future, it'll get a little faster. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of work to do, but it's such a good exercise. I just wrote a blog post about the things I learned in my book writing process. And that was the number one lesson was that that book proposal became such, it was like a living, breathing document for me because it was a reference point. I would often go back to it and say, okay, what did I say I was going to say here? Am I still aiming for the same target that I said I was going to write towards in my book proposal? So it was such a good exercise and something I think writers should do regardless of their publishing ambitions. Do you agree? Do you think that every writer should try at least to write a book proposal, even if they're not going for a traditionally published book?
I think it can definitely be really stretching. And like, even if you're looking to self publish, I've heard of lots of authors who self publish say, I still did a book proposal because, like you were saying, it's that living document that helps keep you on track and make sure you're doing what you set out to do. And you're not taking all these rabbit trails, but you're able to stay focused and to also make sure before you set out writing this book that you have a marketable idea, you have a thoroughly fleshed out idea, and I think, yeah, like that's whenever I've heard people say, I'm afraid of writing a book proposal because what if it gets rejected by everybody? And I've sunk all this time into it. But you learn so much doing it and you grow so much as a writer. And
Mhm.
so like I said earlier, I have a graveyard of book proposals on my computer. And it used to be discouraging, but I can look at each individual one and say I learned something different each time and I grew as a writer. I grew in perseverance of being able to do something even not knowing how it would result, but doing it for the sake of I need to try, and also learn how to distill ideas. I think that's a really challenging thing as writers because we like using lots of words. We
Yeah.
like sitting down and writing thousands of words. Go please. And so you learn how to distill ideas, you learn how to stay on track, you learn how to then clean it up. You learn how to trace those themes and how to carry those themes. You learn how to stay focused and not go on rabbit trails like we were talking about earlier. And so I think it's a great practice for anybody. It's not necessarily something for just the person who wants to be traditionally published. And even if it is a failure in the sense that every agent and publisher rejects it, that doesn't mean the work was wasted. There's still going to be so much you grow and gain and learn from in the process of writing it.
So, with the ones that you said are in your graveyard, did you feel like after a good attempt to try and sell those book proposals that they just weren't worth pursuing anymore. Because I think a lot of writers might feel like, well, what if I go to this effort and it doesn't work out the way I want it to? I think some might feel motivated just to continue writing and self-publish, but could you speak a little bit to why you laid some of those to rest? Put a RIP and over their tombstones.
I think for some of them, it was about the feedback I got because sometimes it was like simply platform and that was annoying. And it's like, love the idea, love the writing, but your platform. And it's like, I can't do anything about that. That's frustrating. But
Yeah.
some of them, I would get consistent feedback about the idea itself or about the way the book, like where the way I showed it would progress. And just saying, this is too similar to what's already out there, or that, I don't think this idea is clear enough yet. And in those cases, I said, you know what? I'm going to trust the people who've been doing this for decades. And I'm going to say, maybe they're right and lay it to rest for a bit and maybe come back with fresh eyes and months, years, or whatever it may be down the road. And just take what I did learn from it.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that's helpful, a helpful way to think about it. Like if there's holes in the idea or something needs further development, you have to decide, am I willing to to make those changes or am I good? Saying I've, lesson learned, moving on. So that's helpful. Well, what we are going to launch a book proposal challenge, easier said than done, in the writer's block in a couple weeks. It's going to start in September. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what we're going to cover during that challenge?
Yeah, we are going to spend 6 weeks going through the entire process piece by piece. Thematically, we're going to start with like getting that idea down, getting that single line statement, then building out that summary. Then we're going to focus on who is this book for, the audience. Then we're going to get into, that dreaded platform conversation and what it looks like to put that in the proposal. And we'll talk about writing out those chapter summaries. And then give you guys time to work on those sample chapters too. And throughout it, like I said, we'll walk through it piece by piece, have lots of time for questions. And I'm even going to give you templates for the entire book proposal. So that way, basically, you just write down your information that you gather through the workshops and then you plug it straight into the template and you are good to go.
That will be so helpful. And I think the template idea is a helpful piece of that puzzle for a lot of first time book proposal writers, making sure that you have all of the elements in there. And I love the community aspect too, because it is such a solitary work. How, so I know we ran this challenge last year and we had quite a few participants who really enjoyed it. What was that community aspect like last year in terms of, you know, sharing ideas, getting feedback? Was that a big part of the challenge? And how did that help the writers kind of get clearer on their book proposals?
I found it really helpful for the other participants because they were able to, where I might not have like an idea right at the top of my head that somebody have a question of like, here's the idea I'm working with, but I don't know like who the readership is for it, or I don't know how to narrow my focus. Somebody else, if I didn't have an idea off the top of my head, was able to chime in and say, here's an idea, or even able to give encouragement and say, that's a book I need. That's a book I want to read. Or at times, like another part of the proposal that I haven't mentioned is the comparative titles, where you have to talk about here are other things that are already out there that are similar to my idea. And that can be really challenging too. And so it can be helpful to have those other people to say, oh, I read a book just like this, but it was missing this aspect that it sounds like you're hitting. And so you should really emphasize that. And just to be able to gain ideas and that vast ability of different ages, different experiences, to be able to say, having to have different input on your ideas and give you feedback like that. I found it really helpful.
I think it's such a great idea because as you're writing your book proposal, you're constantly asking yourself, these questions like, is this clear? Does this make sense? I wonder if other people have ideas about this topic in particular. And so this challenge gives you the opportunity to have those sounding boards and to share your thoughts and ask your questions and get your feedback. So I think it's a great opportunity for somebody. Who would you say, like, how far should you be in your own thought process if you're considering joining this 6-week challenge? How far along in your idea should you be in order to get the most out of it?
I think if you have an idea in which you can come up with several chapter ideas that you would want to work off of, or if you've had something that you've been able to flesh down into like a back cover copy, I think that would be a great starting place.
So you don't have to have it all figured out because you're going
No.
to figure it out together and you're going to learn from Lara. She's going to walk you through all of those foundational elements. There's going to be a time of teaching and then a time of application, a time of questions, a time of sharing your progress, your questions as you go along. So, yeah. What else are there any other things you want to talk about specifically related to the challenge?
I can't think of anything, just that it was a really fun time to be able to just hear each other's ideas, to just to talk about the gospel and the good news through writing books, and to hear how different people are taking what they've learned over the years and share it with other people. I found it so encouraging and life-giving. I was always so filled up afterwards.
So cool. Well, and so 6 weeks, that's kind of an ambitious time frame. You may or may not finish your book proposal, but this challenge will definitely give you a really big head start. And depending on how much time you're willing to put into it in between our weekly gatherings, you can probably make quite a bit of progress on that book proposal. So just a couple other details. This will take place in the writer's block. So if you are listening to this podcast and you're not a part of the writer's block, there will be two links. There we have two versions of the writer's block. We have a free version and a premium version. Free members will get to enjoy certain elements of the writer's block, but they'll pay a little bit more. So it's $149 for those who are free members. But if you are a paid member, meaning you pay for a monthly subscription, you pay only 75 for the 6-week challenge. So we are excited and we're going to put those links into the show notes here. Um, Amy asked the structure of this, and yes, because it's in the writer's block, it does happen over Zoom, and you will have access into a specific space created just for the book proposal. Your events will be in that space, areas to ask questions, to share progress, upload files, that kind of thing. And they will be recorded for the participants who sign up. They'll be the only ones who will be able to see the replay. So even if you aren't able to make the meetings, we hope you are, but if you aren't, you can still watch those replays. And those are going to happen on Mondays from September 15th through October 27th at 11 a.m. Central Time Zone. So again, that information, we'll put a link into the show notes so you can kind of look at those details again. So um, with that, there's some ladies on the call. Do you all have any questions for Lara about book proposals or comments about maybe even your own process with book proposals? Anything? We'd like to hear from you.
Well, first, I'd like to say that, Laura, I really enjoyed when you ran this last year. I benefited a lot. It was actually my second book proposal, but I like how you demystified it, and you simplified it down, even though it is a large document and even though it does take a lot of commitment. It's not that you oversimplified it, but you simplified it to oh, okay, I can get my mind around this. And then with my second book proposal, the one I worked on with you, then when I went to my publisher, they had their own form that I was supposed to fill out, and I was able to take all those pieces that you had taught me and plug them in to that pitch form. So here's my question. I am just about now ready to send it off because I wanted to really polish up my sample chapter a lot and figure out my template for it. When do you feel is the right time to actually send it off? Like, you were talking about doing 3 chapters, that's typical. My publisher just wants 2,000 words of a chapter, which isn't even a whole chapter. And so I've got that, and I've got a second chapter that I've been using to compare back and forth to make sure the template matches. But would you recommend getting further along before sending it? When would you send it?
I think if they only want 2,000 words and you feel confident as the writer that you think, I feel really confident with this idea. I personally don't feel like I need to flesh this out more, practice more. I'm ready to send it off. I think that's fine. If they only want the 2,000, then I wouldn't worry about coming up with more if you feel ready with that amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, Rosemary, the book proposal you're about to submit is what you worked on last year. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. And so, since you went through it last year, and it sounds like it was very productive for you, was it something that, I mean, you've been working on this entire time? Have you put it down and come back to it? What's been your experience overall with the time commitment and the process?
Good question. Yeah. So I worked on the sample chapters since then. So I fleshed out my outline more. So the outline in the book proposal is only a paragraph for each chapter. So I fleshed out my outline more, started putting things into separate Word docs of like, this is going in chapter 7, that's going in chapter 13, And then I sat down and started writing them. And I wasn't satisfied with the template. Even though I knew what point I wanted to make, I wasn't satisfied with the order and the tone and the voice. And so I kept rewriting these same 2 chapters. And then the other thing that I had to wait for was my first traditionally published book was being released in March. So we did this last fall. I needed to wait for that first book to come out before querying the next one. So then I got really wrapped up in publicity for that book. And now that that's slowing down and I've had time to polish these 2 chapters, I'm thinking, okay, I think I might be ready to send it off. But I'm still scared that they'll say yes, and then I won't be able to carry through somehow. Some way, my mind will go blank, and I might not be able to finish it.
Oh,
I feel like that happens though to every writer. Like every writer I've ever talked to, that once they get that book contract, their brain is just like, zoop,
Yeah.
I have no ideas. It's that like immediate panic. At first, I think it's just that anxiety, that panic, that pressure. But then once you get into the groove of it, you find your pace.
Yes. Yes. So I think I am. I'm planning to send it out this coming week, but I definitely wanted to hop on and thank you, Lara, for your help with that because it gave me confidence so that when I went to plug it into the pitch form that they gave me, it was like, oh, I have that. Oh, I have that too. Yeah, here it is. I'll just pop it in there.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I remember doing that same thing and I was like, "Oh, this is a snap," right?
Yeah.
Because even if when you're filling out an online form, it's copy paste at that point, but you've put a bunch of work into each of those sentences and word choices. So that's awesome.
Exactly.
Any other questions, comments? Well, Lara, it's always so good to talk about book proposals. And I think it's just kind of one of those perennial needs that writers have and a lot of insecurity that kind of follows it. And so it's so helpful to have you alongside as just a coach, a mentor, a friend to help guide and direct us through that process. So it's so helpful if anyone, it just, you have an inkling of an idea, like Lara said, you've got maybe enough to build out a couple chapter summaries or a back cover copy. Don't neglect that idea and come join us in this book proposal challenge. You never know what will come from just being with other writers and kind of soundboarding your ideas. So we're really excited to see this next challenge take off. Well, thank you all for being here. Lara, thank you for your flexibility. She's had little ones in and out through this call, and she's just multitasked beautifully, just like good moms do. So we thank you for being here and being
Thank you for your
flexible.
patience.
Oh, no, it's great. I love seeing all their identical little faces come through your door. So thank you. All right. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.